Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session on planning for your child's future. My name is Matthew Jones, and I'm a senior advisor at Oriana Private Wealth Hong Kong. I've been advising individuals and families for over a decade, and I've been living in Hong Kong as an expat since 2017, and I'm also a father myself. In today's session, I'll discuss some of the important things to think about when it comes to starting or raising a family in Hong Kong, and planning opportunities to take advantage of or perhaps be aware of that can assist you with staying in front of your finances. So the topics we'll be discussing during this presentation will be around budgeting for major expenditure items such as hospitals and schools, managing your cash flow in the view of saving towards these major expenses, covering the different types of insurance options available to protect you and your family, some key estate planning considerations, and some high-level pros and cons regarding the different wealth accumulation strategies for the future. If you have any questions, kindly add them in the chat box and I can answer these at the end of the talk. If you leave your details, I can also drop you a note following the session. So firstly, we'll start with discussing with, I guess, two of the major expenses for new parents or couples planning to start a family. These are hospitals and medical costs and considerations, from prenatal checkups through to delivery, the benefits and considerations for public and private, and education, which can be a significant expense for anyone really if you are considering international schooling in Hong Kong. So look, speaking as an expat, I can honestly say that both public and private hospitals in Hong Kong with regards to maternity are fantastic. Each obviously have their benefits and drawbacks, and this is, of course, a very personal decision for you and your partner. I certainly won't try to answer this for you today. However, I'll cover a few of the points here from a financial planning perspective, at least. Often, one of the biggest considerations for whether to go private or public is usually the cost. If you are fortunate enough to have maternity cover as part of your medical, this can certainly take the sting out of these fees. If you're considering going private, I would suggest checking with your employer or employment medical cover. If you don't have maternity cover, you may want to consider taking out additional medical cover. Although you will need to plan ahead in this regard, as medical policies will often require coverage for at least 12 months prior to pregnancy before you're actually eligible to claim on maternity costs. So just look into that and be aware. However, in the absence of medical cover and your preference is still to go private, just be mindful that these costs can often range from $100,000 for a semi-private room through to $250,000 and above for emergency delivery, including C-sections. I've just pulled the maternity package information here straight from the Matilda website here on the screen for your reference. The other option is obviously going public for delivery. So the choice of public hospitals will often depend on your catchment area, and you'll need to be a Hong Kong ID holder. You likely won't have the privacy of a private hospital and perhaps less hands-on service compared to a private hospital. However, you won't have issues with availability. And in emergencies, a lot of the major public hospitals are usually better equipped. It's actually not uncommon to hear that in an emergency situation, many are actually moved from private hospitals to the better equipped public hospitals in this case. And finally, one of the biggest ones there is obviously the cost for inpatient fees at public hospitals are a lot lower. For a 3-day and 2-night stay, which is pretty typical, it's less than $500 Hong Kong. In terms of hospitals, a favourite for public deliveries in Hong Kong is certainly the Queen Mary. If you have a referral from your GP or OBGYN, and obviously a Hong Kong ID holder, you may be eligible to get a private room at the Queen Mary Hospital as well. if you're lucky. And nearby, you also have the Senyak Hospital, where you can go for antenatal, postnatal checkups, as well as exercise classes and things post-pregnancy, which were quite useful for my wife. To balance out the costs, but to ensure you're receiving the best pre and post care, it may also be a consideration to utilise private services for the pregnancy, and then delivery through a public hospital as well. So a few options there and a few different considerations. On to schooling. So I would suggest, if you're thinking about having children, then now is certainly the time to start planning their education pathway, and also obviously saving for the costs. If you already have children, well, you're going to have to start needing to look at your cash flow as well. There's more than 1,200 schools and over 170 international schools in Hong Kong. And again, it comes down to personal preference here, but from a financial cost perspective, like many countries, it's certainly night and day between private and public schools. I've just pulled some information here just to convey the typical costs, along with summary of just 10 of the private schools across the grades, to demonstrate some of these fees. On top of annual school fees as well, there's a range of additional costs that can apply as well, from debentures, in some cases additional deposits, and I guess relatively speaking incidental costs, such as uniforms, laptops, iPads, books, stationery, etc., as required by the particular school. Your children obviously certainly don't need to attend private schools. However, for those that want their children studying the more international IB curriculum, expats in particular, and non-Chinese speaking families, it is often the preference to be sending your child to an international school. And this is a major expense and really needs to be planned for in advance for anyone. So the English Schools Foundation, or ESF, which a lot of you may have heard of, offer subsidised schools, providing an alternative to conventional Hong Kong education. So ESF schools are essentially being funded by the government to support English-speaking children, and may potentially offer a more affordable international school pathway, with these schools implementing the IB curriculum. So typically, ESF schools have pretty high demand, and to secure a place, you need to have those applications in early. And to be absolutely certain, some recommend starting ESF in kindergarten. In recent times, post-COVID, broadly demand has fallen in Hong Kong for these schools, although for some of the more popular ESF schools, it can still be challenging to secure a spot for your child. So just be across this. And while relatively more affordable than some of the top private schools, ESF schools are still, like I said, a significant line item for any household cash flow, particularly if you've got multiple children. So just for reference again here, I've included the 2022-2023 ESF school fees, associated costs, straight from the ESF website as well here. So, okay, now that we've established having kids is expensive, we can discuss putting in place a financial plan. So to ensure you're not forced to compromise on future goals, such as the education for your children, it is important to put in place a strategy to ensure you are saving sufficiently for the future. Understanding the costs, or putting the numbers and detail towards your future goals, is a starting point, and you can ensure that you're saving and putting away sufficient assets to meet your future goals. An advisor obviously will have the tools to assist with this planning process, and to ensure that you have an appropriate plan in place in line with achieving these goals. However, if you're perhaps a little unclear on your goals, if you can, just start saving now. Further to this, on top of simply saving cash in a bank account, you should also ensure that you're getting some interest on your savings to benefit from compound interest or returns, which is essentially cumulative returns compounding over time. In the current economic environment, that we're in. This should be pretty easy, but with interest rates so high, banks are offering a range of term deposits, time deposits they're referred to here, and cash-like offerings. However, interest rates won't stay this high forever, and it will be important to think about how you're growing your savings and investments appropriately over time. On the right-hand side here, I've just put together a simple example of saving just as little as 5,000 Hong Kong dollars a month, and the result of just a straight line projection of 5% per annum interest or returns over time, compounding over 7 years. It might surprise you, but the result could be over 500,000 Hong Kong dollars over that 7-year period. If you manage to put 10,000 away a month, you can obviously double this pot size, and these savings can very well go towards funding your children's education. Further, in addition to the simple fundamentals of saving compound returns, it is important to think about cross-jurisdictional planning and tax mitigation, especially for the expats tuning in today. For instance, in the case of relocation or repatriation, if this is in your future, then you may need to think of the tax implications of capital gains upon moving back to countries with more punitive tax regimes, such as Australia or the UK. In this instance, there may be merit of putting in place tax-efficient structures such as investment bonds or the aptly named education bonds. There's pros and cons to these structures, which I have discussed in previous sessions. I won't go into detail today, but I suggest simply reaching out if you'd like to know more, and whether this is something or something like this should have a place in your financial plan. So with a family, you absolutely need to ensure you have a contingency plan in place if something were to ever happen to you or your partner. Among the main types we often look at for clients and families is medical cover, life and disability cover, and critical illness. Medical insurance, it offers reimbursement for hospital and in some cases outpatient expenses such as GP visits, specialists, medication, etc. In many cases, this may be offered by your employer, but it's also important to review the policy to know what you're actually covered for, as every policy differs. You may need a top-up, and it's important you speak to a specialist to review coverage to ensure this is adequate. Life and disability cover. So this provides a lump sum payout in the case of an unexpected death or permanent disability preventing you from working. This is particularly important to ensure there's funds to cover living expenses, debts, school fees, and any non-negotiables to ensure your family is okay and provided for in the case of an unexpected illness or accident. And then finally is critical illness again. So this is, again, a lump sum cover option ensuring cancers and major illnesses, heart attack, stroke, for instance. This payout may be used to provide for loss of income, from not being able to work due to a major illness or expense, or expenses from the cost of treatment, etc., that may be over and above what you're covered for by a medical policy or in the absence of medical policy. So you may also consider adding your children to these policies as well, or even taking out specific child cover for critical illness as well. Again, for those thinking that they may relocate in the future as well, another consideration is whether you should be taking out cover through providers offered in Hong Kong, or perhaps a country that you may be moving to, or even your country of domicile. It is important to understand the coverage if you are changing countries or expect to be relocating in the future, and just being across any territorial exclusions that may apply as well, just to ensure that you are in fact covered. It's obviously a complex area, and again, one that you should be speaking to a qualified and experienced broker and seeking advice here. So, look, everyone needs a will, and every parent with minor children need to have guardianship arrangements in place. A will, in definition, is a legal document. It's stating your intentions on how to divide your estate and who to receive your assets in the case of your passing. Really important to have this in place, and to ensure that your assets aren't frozen and inaccessible for family members. It should also state any particular intentions for how the executor should distribute assets in line with your wishes. For instance, providing funds on trust for kids, education fees, and I guess provisions in the event of the unfortunate happening to both parents. We always recommend multi-jurisdictional wills for each country of assets, which will ensure no delays and issues with processing probate across multiple jurisdictions. And guardianship. So guardianship is putting in place provisions for named carers for your children in the case of an unexpected death while your children are minors. For expats, you should also be thinking about establishing temporary guardianship if those permanent guardians named are also not in Hong Kong. So on to future planning. So outside, I guess, of specific goal-related funding such as education, how should you be growing your wealth for the future? So there are a number of options or strategies that you may want to consider. This is, of course, case by case, and the important role we play as advisors is to determine the most beneficial strategy to implement as part of your financial plan. However, I thought I would just discuss a few pros and cons and some of the more common options that individuals and families may be weighing up. So firstly, wrap accounts. These are investment platforms that offer a wide range of investment options. This may include a combination of stocks, bonds, ETFs, managed funds, and even term deposits. Usually with a relatively low admin fee. The benefit is that you can build diversified portfolios with exposure to a number of different asset classes. We, as advisors, often utilize these structures to assist our clients in constructing portfolios suitable for their objectives. However, while there is no tax on investments in Hong Kong, the typical wrap account or investment platform is subject to tax in countries such as Australia, UK, many other countries, depending on your potential relocation plans and future tax residency. So to mitigate these potential tax implications, I guess the option is investment-linked assurance schemes. So such as earlier I mentioned, investment bonds. These can offer specific tax benefits on returns and withdrawals in countries where investment portfolios are typically taxed. This can offer tax advantages for future goal-related funding, such as education and planning around future costs, or simply to fund an early retirement, semi-retirement, or whatever this looks like for you. However, these are complex structures. The tax benefits work differently for different countries. The costs can be higher and often are, and the trade-off is that these are often appropriate for longer-term strategies. And I guess for those that own property, should you be simply paying down the debt with these current high interest rates, or where you can depositing funds in an offset account against a mortgage? Perhaps, as it will reduce the cost of servicing the loan and in interest payments, but it is important to understand that rates won't stay at this level forever. And often over the longer term, growth assets as an alternative would be expected to provide greater returns than the interest cost savings. So particularly with the benefit of no tax on these returns as a resident of Hong Kong as well. And yeah, I guess just in most cases with an offset account, you've got the flexibility to withdraw those funds again as required as well. So perhaps a good strategy in the short to medium term. MPF may offer an option for someone looking to simply top up their existing Hong Kong employer contributions to benefit from a pooled investment scheme with some limited tax benefits on voluntary contributions as well. However, in my opinion, there are much better investment options available for investing your money, as there are indirect costs which are not overly transparent that often detract from returns with MPF, and which these returns are typically not that great regardless. There are also restrictions on accessibility, which is typically age 65 in Hong Kong, or the option for a one-time or one-off withdrawal if you are permanently departing Hong Kong as well. So also just be mindful that these investments can be punitively taxed by some jurisdictions upon becoming a tax resident as well, for those that are relocating and utilising that one-off withdrawal. International pension schemes, so superannuation in Australia or UK pensions as well. Should you be contributing to any of these funds for your retirement while you're working abroad? It's a pretty common question. And again, a complex area which requires professional, personal financial advice to really consider your situation in depth and the goals you're looking to achieve. However, generally, some benefits of doing so would be the potential tax deductions for specific contributions. In some cases, access to quality investment options, and often, most importantly, building assets via a tax-efficient structure to fund your retirement upon repatriating back to these locations. All right, so as we finish the presentation today, it's a bit of a short one. I'll just leave everyone with this quote from Mr. Warren Buffett: "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." So sometimes, particularly in Hong Kong, it is easier said than done, but I think it reigns true that you need to have a plan and some discipline in place to ensure you're accumulating sufficient wealth to achieve your goals. Otherwise, you risk potentially needing to compromise or make compromises down the track. So in summary, from putting in place an appropriate savings plan through to insurance considerations and estate planning, for instance, wills and guardianship for your children, I suggest coming to us for a chat so we can assist you in any or all of these areas as required. So look, that's it. I'll just take a break for a couple of minutes, just start reading through some of the questions that have come through. If there are any more, just send them through now. If I don't get to them, like I said, I will be reaching out following the session as well. So I've got one, start looking at these. What should be included in the will? So look, as mentioned there, so naming an executor, so that's naming someone that you trust that would be involved in winding up your estate and carrying out the wishes that you've put in place in the will. Include in the will as well, as mentioned, specifics for how your estate will be divided and distributed, any trust provisions, etc., in particular for minors. So you can set up what is referred to as testamentary trust. It's a trust that's formed upon death. And essentially, you can have provisions from simple through to very detailed of how that trust operates, distributions, what it's for, who would be the trustee of that trust and in charge and control for the beneficiaries, who may be children or children of children, and so on, if you want to leave a legacy in particular. important, as mentioned, almost always we recommend putting in place wills for each jurisdiction you have assets, in particular real estate. Really important, as probate can only be processed essentially for one jurisdiction at a time, and if there's any hold-ups, well, that can mean that assets can be frozen and other issues, which you don't want to fall upon your beneficiaries. So we can do wills, so please reach out. We can assist you on that front. What are the tax benefits for investment bonds? So as mentioned, it varies for each different country. Australia, for instance, after 10 years, you can essentially look to withdraw tax-deferred income completely tax-free, obviously keeping in mind contribution limits. So basically 125% of each year's previous contributions. It's a complex area. Again, come and have a chat to us. UK as well, that's different. The tax treatment is different again there. So you receive 5% withdrawals immediately, tax-free each year, or gross roll-up. So these I guess the 5% can accumulate over time as well, which can be utilised in the future for a more tax-efficient approach to investing for relocation back to the UK. And as mentioned, just importantly, considerations around contribution limits there as well, and what can be invested in, etc. So come and speak to us. Look, I think that looks pretty much it. As mentioned, we'll be sending out the recording and an email following the presentation today. For anyone that's new on the line too, we'll just reach out as well to see if you'd like to come in for initial consultation or a review, speak to some of these areas or other in terms of your financial planning. So thank you for joining today, and yeah, we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you.